Hello, hello, and welcome to Heavy Hands. Hello, I'm Connor Rebush, your host. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. He may be with me. Phil?
Yeah. No, we haven't cut out yet.
I'm going to need you to interrupt. All right. Now, I've been training you.
I can do that. Yes.
I've been training you all this time.
100% I can interrupt.
Okay, this is good. I need you to keep doing this.
Truman taught me how.
Keep doing this every couple seconds just so I know you're there. All right. On this week's episode of Heavy Hands, I'm nervous now. I can feel it coming.
I'm here.
Barboza versus Chikadze. That's the card ahead of us. Pretty interesting featherweight fight. Still don't really know how I feel about Giga Chikadze or what my read is on him as a fighter. I think he's one of those guys where, like, he doesn't do all the things I would like to see that I'm like, oh, this is how fighting works, but he's pretty good, obviously, anyway. So it hurts my mind. But we're gonna get into that and how he matches up with Edson Barboza. Otherwise, on this card, we've got Kevin Lee versus Daniel Rodriguez. We've got some other stuff as well. It's not great, Phil. We're between two not particularly great cards after a pay-per-view, which was preceded by a card worse than either of these. Is next week's card okay? Yeah, it looks better. You know, it's just one of those times.
Okay, we had a small cutout there, but I'm going to assume it was filler. Well, and I'm going to agree with what you just said.
Yes, I should have known when you stopped interrupting. So tell me about Edson Barboza Giga Chikadze. This way I can be sure that you're there.
Yeah, so I kind of tend to agree with the assessment of Chikadze, because
I thought you didn't hear the assessment of Chikadze.
Yeah, I heard that bit.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't think we're looking at a Israel Adesanya type crossover fighter here.
No,
he does not necessarily look like he is someone who is like totally coherent and just a technical step above almost everyone he's going to fight, particularly in the striking realm. I mean, that's the weird thing. One of the weird things about Chikadze is that he's really not a subtle striker at all.
Right.
That is one of the things you would sort of expect to see from a kickboxer is, you know, one of the things we always talk about, like gradation and granularity. And, you know, we've mentioned this before as being one of the traits that Chikadze sort of tends to sell out for knockouts and thus doesn't get knockouts and so on. But the more I watch him, the more I'm just like, I think that's just who he is.
That's just who he is, yeah.
He's just like, because, and he's not a massive hitter, but he really fights like he is a massive hitter.
Yeah, I mean, I think he hits pretty damn hard. That's, that's clear, especially with his kicks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is exactly what I'm talking about. There's the sort of like, what are the markers you would look for that you would expect an elite kickboxer to use to outclass MMA strikers? And it's little things like, you know, where are all of his feints? Where's his defense? How is he chaining things together in all of these different, differing patterns, going from a defensive move and between different types of defense? You know, when is he blocking? When is he parrying? When is he moving his feet? You would look for like little adjustment steps. There's like subtle understandings of angles and distance. He doesn't really demonstrate a lot of that, as you said. He kind of just tries to wallop people. He certainly seems to have a really good sense of distance. I mean, he looks,
yeah.
That's what feels like.
He has a good sense of distance,
yeah.
And he has a good sense of timing.
Yeah, that's the thing about him that screams experienced striker. But it makes it clear that, like, as a kickboxer, he was kind of just doing this stuff then.
Yeah.
Get close to me and I will buzzsaw you with something I throw with 100% power.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm not sure how well that will work against Edson Barboza, but I think Chikadze in general, and we can talk about this, we've seen this dynamic more recently. He has two stances that he fights from, and one, I think you can approximately refer to one as the defense and stable stance, and one as the offense stance.
Yeah.
Because when he is orthodox, he is a bit more granular, I think, in the way that he fights. He can throw combinations. He is generally harder to hit. And when he's southpaw, he's throwing a big left hand or a big left kick.
Yeah.
And he's easier to hit, but he's more dangerous.
Yeah.
So we've seen, and in terms of as you mentioned, good sense of timing, good sense of distance. He's not. So he fought Omar Morales, who is a decent MMA kickboxer. You know, he beat Gabriel Benitez relatively cleanly. It
was a close fight, but he was very competitive for 3 rounds and a great fight with Gabriel Benitez at the very least. Yeah, he's very capable.
But he really struggled to find his range against Chikadze.
Yeah.
But I think in general, you know, Chikadze doesn't possess much of the things that I would expect to generally trouble Barboza. He's not blazingly quick. I don't think he steps in on his shots a lot. And I think, you know, level changes and so on have troubled Barboza in the past. But he's not really level changing. He's just coming after people on the understanding that they're probably scared of his kicks.
Yeah.
You know, he'll just come in behind big long punches. This isn't a Jamie Varner or Dan Ige style blitz. He's not a consistent pressuring fighter.
Certainly
pretty
not.
much a mid-range fencer, which Barboza has shown that he is excellent, still pretty excellent at dealing with, unless you're a real high quality fighter. I'm not really sure that Barboza has actually, I think, apart from Shane Burgos, this is going to be one of those times where I think Barboza probably still has the speed edge.
Yeah, I think you may be right.
I don't know. I mean, I think the more I look at this one, the more I think I like Barboza in this. I think it's not just I don't think it's necessarily the kicks, because I think Chikadze has been pretty good at dealing with kicks. I think it's the hands. I think Barboza he's got a more active jab. He's got obviously that nice left hook. He works the body with his hands. And he, in these kind of exchanges, I think Barboza is honestly a bit better defensively. I think he moves his head more.
Certainly.
Yeah, I think I like Edson.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning the same way. I did the same thing. I looked through. I'm like, who are parallels? The troublesome thing is there aren't a lot of people. As much as none of the people who beat Edson Barboza look like Giga Chikadze, there aren't a lot of people who look like Giga Chikadze on that record. Like he's maybe, I don't know.
I mean, if we're talking straight punches, dangerous kicks, stance switching, and head in the air, the closest is Pettis, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like, what if Anthony Pettis was huge and certainly had a better sense of ringcraft?
Yeah.
Again, not that Chikadze is not, he does read in these ways somewhat like an experienced kickboxer. It's just not, like you said, it's not Adesanya. It's not all these subtleties. But in terms of general benefits of experience in striking, he doesn't easily get cornered. He keeps moving so he can get himself back into open space as often as possible. He doesn't tend to get pressured too much, although like Barboza, he can be put into a bit of a gallop and have his kick sort of taken away by pressure. But he's pretty aware of where he is in the cage. And that's definitely a major difference between the likes of Pettis and Barboza. And then there's the size, which I think is definitely also a big part of his success. He's very tall. I haven't looked at the specific numbers, which I should.
He's 6 feet tall. What's
his reach?
Barboza is 5'11", and Pettis is 5'10".
Yeah, what's the reach on Chikadze, though? According to this, 1 inch shorter than Barboza's wingspan.
Huh? There you go.
That's very weird. He reads like as such a gigantic, lanky fighter.
Yeah.
Barboza's apparently...
We are comparing him to career lightweights here, and Barboza is a large featherweight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So, I guess it's if Pettis was more confident than he was at that point and had ring craft.
Yeah, but that was one of the problems with the Pettis fight, is that it wasn't dictated by ring craft as much as anyone thought it might be, because everyone was just like, oh, what happens when one of these guys gets moving backwards? Pettis can't fight moving backwards, and neither can Barboza. As it turned out, they both just conceded to have a mid-range striking match,
True.
And Barboza ended up being way better.
Barboza had just better situational footwork for that kind of fight, which he always does have very good footwork for that kind of fight. Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you said earlier. I think a major part, honestly, and this is why I'm leaning towards Pettis, towards Barboza, a major part of the impression of his greater speed. Because I don't know at this point if he is actually like raw speed faster than Giga Chikadze. But he's way more efficient a puncher. I think this is the thing is I saw some small signs in the Cub Swanson fight of Giga Chikadze sort of stepping his game up. Against, I'm assuming, an opponent that he took very seriously compared to all of the nobodies they fed him earlier in the UFC. His counters were very straight, for example, which has not always been the case. Even in that Omar Morales fight, he was swinging for the bleachers with overhand lefts, crazy wide right hooks. Like, they were some really, frankly, ugly punches for such an experienced striker. The trouble is we only had a minute of the Cub Swanson fight, before he finished him with the Giga kick, that liver shot. But straight jabs, straight counters. I don't know if that will even out some of this impression I have of Barboza being a quicker, more efficient fighter in the pocket. But otherwise, I would assume that to be his advantage. If it was a Chikadze who fought in these previous fights, Barboza, as we saw against Burgos, like great straight punches, capable defense, and he keeps his feet under him really well when he's punching. So his combinations come one shot after the other really smoothly without compromising his balance. No drag between the shots unless he wants to really lean into one. He's become like a really adjustable. Essentially, he can adjust the intensity of his shots and the speed, sort of at will, because he's a good technical boxer. And yeah, I also thought particularly of the Barboza left hook. I think Chikadze does this thing where he'll lunge in with one of his big punches and he will lose his stance and then he will just duck. And then he will do some really rushed adjustment steps to get back to another position, and then he'll fire another shot. Again, people that he's fought in the UFC are generally afraid of his power and his size, and they don't capitalize on these things. There was one moment in the Morales fight, though, where Morales threw an uppercut left hook, and it worked really well. It put Chikadze right back in his heels and bought Morales one of his short periods of like positional control. I think Barboza's combination punching inside, like he was too good at coming up with counters to Shane Burgos. Once he got his timing, he was able to read that distance closing and hit him sort of at will. He hit him with uppercuts. He hit him with right hooks over the jab. He hit him with 2 shots and then came back with that wonderful left hook he's got. And some part of me just sees Chikadze like falling into the pocket on one of these big sloppy punches and being right there for counter left hooks and uppercuts.
Yeah. And also, like...
But that's probably too granular for this. This is the thing. Chikadze, I don't want to make the mistake. I'm sorry, I'm going to let you go on, but
No, you go.
I don't want to make the mistake of thinking, which I often do, that because Chikaze doesn't do all the things I want him to do, he's not good.
Mm.
He's clearly a very dangerous striker. Very dangerous. He has a grasp on like 2 or 3 really basic switch ups that will pretty much work on anyone. Like, so I don't know.
Yeah, and and I think the point you made that he, in some ways, he might have been fighting to the level of his competition.
Yeah.
That might make sense. Like, he might have been fighting guys and just thought, I don't want to risk having to have like a technical fight with this guy and getting my head taken off. Every time I fight, every time I throw against Omar Morales, I'm just going to try and rip his head off. Because I think the Swanson fight, you're right, it was a genuinely better, tighter performance than we've seen from him.
He looked dialed in.
Yeah. He stayed over his feet more. Mm-hmm. He threw combinations more. But
more feints.
In the end, I think I've just seen Barboza. I've seen Barboza do that for longer.
True.
Like I've just got to trust in his ability to and I think Barboza did show improvements in the Burgos fight. He did more of jabbing his way out of the pocket when he jabbed and turned to escape the fence. Mm-hmm. Again, throwing combinations, punches into kicks, in a way which Chikaze really sort of doesn't.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just like at kicking range, it's kicking. At punching range, it's punching. It's basically the hands will keep you scared, and then he'll kick you in the body or the head or the legs.
Yeah, it always just, instead of the two being like flowing in combination, it always feels like there's a switch up constantly where if you're worried about the kicks, he'll land a punch and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
But they always do feel very compartmentalized in a way. In a way that Barboza's don't. Barboza is a real, genuine combination striker.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's tougher than we're making it sound, I think. Because I think I think we both like Barboza more.
Yeah,
and
that's the problem.
But I honestly, I think he looks like the guy who, in a lot of ways, Barboza looks like what you would expect from a kickboxer who made it to the UFC more than Chikadze does, even down to the overly biting on level change feints.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So I mean, I think I'm going to pick him. Possibly I'm going to pick him by finish.
Really?
I think he's just like a violent dude at 145.
Yeah.
I mean, over 5 rounds, I think he's just he does attritional damage the whole time. But he works the body. He can knock people down with his hands, as we've seen like several times now.
Yeah,
I think I'll the Aldo fight against Munoz was a reassuring, like, oh, this old guy's still got it, so I'm gonna allow that to trick me into thinking that Barboza is just gonna have this same consistent level of like technical and physical renaissance, and that he's going to be able to put Chikadze away, and setting myself up.
That's fine.
For heartbreak.
That's fine. We'll go down together, Phil. Don't read into that statement. I'm in the same boat. I mean, I'm very hesitant. I don't know. Again, I'm just wary of thinking again that because Chikadze's game seems so basic that it therefore can't be good. That's not how fighting works.
Mm-hmm.
Basic games work super well all the time because people just have the right ingredients. They're confident enough, they're quick enough on the trigger, they have a strong enough will, they hit hard enough. Chikadze has a lot of these things pretty clearly. And I want to emphasize, I got a very difficult to trust impression because of the length of the fight, but I got a distinct impression that Chikadze was taking Cub Swanson more seriously and is in fact capable of a little more as an MMA striker than we've seen up to that point. But I do think, this is a kind of fight where Barboza's greater granularity can make the difference. He's a better counter striker. He's got better defense. Just in general, I think if anyone does get to pressure, it could probably be 145er slugger Bomboza, could end up pressuring. And I think what you pointed out about the attritive weapons is very important too. We've seen some signs of Chikadze slowing down late in fights before, in which it's been entirely one-way traffic. We also saw some extended periods of discomfort when Omar Morales managed to counter his kicks and push him backwards, for like more than 2 seconds at a time. I think Barboza can do a lot of these things, so I'm going to pick him too.
You know what else I'm gonna mention?
Yeah.
Barboza is potentially the most willing and effective wrestler that Chikadze has faced in his UFC career thus far.
You're probably not wrong.
It is notable that Chikadze got taken down and choked out by Austin Springer. Wasn't that long ago. It was 2018.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's shown just brief glimpses. He's shown capabilities on the ground and popping back up to his feet, but also as a top position fighter, he's not afraid to grapple at all. I think this is a big part of Chikadze's success. He's insanely confident. I think that's clear. Which, at some point could be his downfall. But yeah, it would be really funny if Barboza just came in and doubled him, just took him down instantly. I don't expect that to happen though, to be honest. A bit of it, I think, is likely. But, and what perfect timing for a dropout, Phil. Let's end segment one.
Is.
It was a good run, we had about 20 minutes there of uninterrupted conversation. Both of us picking Edson Barboza, setting ourselves up for heartbreak, when we discover that Chikadze is greater than the sum of his parts. After this break, Kevin Lee versus Daniel Rodriguez. Are we going to talk about Muradov Meerschaert too?
Maybe.
After this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We were already getting into an increasingly interesting discussion about this next fight, Kevin Lee versus Daniel Rodriguez. Phil, give me the rundown on this matchup. I'll lay it out right at the start here. You have a bad feeling for Kevin Lee going into this fight. Why is that?
I think, this is kind of a mean matchup for him. I can't remember who he was fighting. He was originally going to be fighting in this, re-debut. Sean Brady. I think Sean Brady makes sense as an opponent for Kevin Lee.
You do?
Yeah.
He and Rodriguez are both on tears. They're both big, strong welterweights.
Yeah, I guess.
Sean Brady would have grappled with him. That would have been more demoralizing, surely.
Yeah, but I think Kevin Lee would be happier grappling with someone than he would be necessarily having to chase someone down. So, I think the basic problem here is that Kevin Lee, he doesn't have much defense, but he also doesn't have, the pure grit of, a Pedro Munoz or someone like that who can just take shots and keep coming.
Yeah.
He can force his way through things, but you can see him visibly forcing his way through.
He feels a lot like Kamaru Usman without being as immortal as Kamaru Usman.
Yeah. I think he's not as immortal, and I think he fundamentally doesn't have just the confidence that Usman does. So yeah, he throws good straight punches. He is a good kicker, but he doesn't really have any way of getting out of the way once people start figuring out his timing and countering him.
It doesn't have any flow.
Yeah. And again, he is a good wrestler, with like a very good ground game, who has a real knack for submissions, but he tends to just try and get the body lock and muscle people. And so, I mean, in a lot of ways, you can see why he wanted to keep going back to lightweight, because so much of his success is built on his two major attributes, which are his freakish reach and the fact that he's just really strong. So Daniel Rodriguez is a very large welterweight, with a real knack for counterpunching and lots of power, who I think is probably going to dial in on Kevin Lee striking after like probably some dicey early going. And then start cracking him with counters that Lee is totally incapable of getting out of the way of. I mean, I think one of the ways the major X factor is that we haven't really seen how Daniel Rodriguez defends takedowns other than by guillotining people or just like a bit of fighting off Nicholas Delby, who is an enthusiastic, if not a good wrestler. But other than that, I think the matchup is basically like, what if Al Iaquinta was way taller, hit way harder, and threw more? And I don't think that necessarily works out all that well for Kevin Lee, much as I like him.
Yeah, here's the thing. I wonder how early success goes in this fight, because I like Daniel Rodriguez a lot as a fighter. I think I tend to like fighters more who surprise me. You know, where I start off not being at all impressed, being rather underwhelmed, in fact, and then I see something and I'm like, wait a minute, there are some hidden depths here. That I really enjoy, and so I tend to latch onto those fighters for a long time. Rodriguez is one of those guys because he got to the UFC, and just seemed like a dumb slugger, really. Like, would throw big, ugly hooks, wasn't particularly fast. In fact, he reads as rather slow, for even by welterweight standards, by the standards of his division. He just seems kind of lumbering. And then I realized that he is, as you said there, a really capable counterpuncher. He's actually really crafty, and I think probably the best example of that so far was his fight with Mike Perry, where that is just like a fight. If you have the skills that Daniel Rodriguez does, Mike Perry is an exhibition. You know, cause he's. I
think that was also that to it in itself that showed an improvement from the Dalby fight, because the Dalby fight was one where you saw Daniel Rodriguez as we'd seen already that Rodriguez was a good counterpuncher. But in the Dalby fight, he was just like, oh, I'm going to be the counterpuncher. I'm going to counterpunch this guy who is smaller and less strong and hits less hard than me. And he lost frankly, a complete bullshit decision.
Yeah.
But also, it was one of those ones where you were like, you sort of have yourself to blame here, because you saw that when you pushed him up against the fence that Dalby had nothing for you.
Yeah.
But I think, in the Perry fight, and yeah, it's difficult you can't necessarily emphasize how effective Rodriguez was against someone who's swiftly becoming a punching bag, but he was more aggressive. He built his own openings. He did not just wait back and he just did not just sit back and counterpunch Mike Perry, even though he certainly could have done.
Yeah. he was very proactive. You know, he realized very early, or I think you're right, came in knowing this, that when he would hit Perry with a good counter, that would then open the opportunity to play all sorts of games with him. You know, he can sting him with this and make him hesitant and then use that expectation. It's like what a good heavy-handed counterpuncher should be doing, is proactively using the opportunities created by those counters. I do still wonder, though. I don't know. I wonder about him, because even Mike Perry had some success early. Certainly Nicholas Dalby did, when Rodriguez was arguably more counterpunchy. He, Dalby cracked him really, really hard, like a minute and a half into the fight, actually. As Rodriguez was just sort of getting lazy with his footwork and just kind of drifting towards him. It wasn't even actually Rodriguez looking for the counter. I mean, he was looking to pressure a counter, opening out of Dalby, but he was pressuring him, and just sort of drifted too close and walked into a hard right hand. The thing is, Kevin Lee, I can't recall if you said this during the segment or before we started, but Kevin Lee always seems to come into a fight with a very clear idea of what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea does not always, have that many sort of branches coming off of it. It doesn't really develop that much. But it usually involves the jab, which is a great weapon for Kevin Lee, even at welterweight, because he's got insanely long arms. And he hits pretty hard, and he sits down on that jab. It is an authoritative weapon. And I just see him getting those shots in. I just wonder about Kevin Lee's early success against a guy like Daniel Rodriguez, who can fall into the counterpuncher role and who has largely succeeded in defending takedowns from like first layer shot wrestlers, which Kevin Lee is not. Kevin Lee's wrestling success generally comes in the body lock, which I might be mistaken here. I'm watching it now to catch up. I believe is how Perry got him down a couple of times too. Mike Perry, another lunkhead who is not necessarily a great wrestler, but incredibly strong when he ties up with people. And he got Rodriguez down twice. So I just wonder, I don't know, like RDA wasn't, especially RDA in a 5-round fight, which I think it was. That was a brutal introduction to the welterweight division for Kevin Lee.
And Kevin Lee was also like visibly quite tired, like 4 minutes in.
That's the thing, right? Yeah. And like having to throw all of your strength at RDA of all people, like, yes, maybe you can pressure RDA. Maybe there's something of, oh, there we go. He's back. Maybe there's something of the Lee's win over Barboza in an opponent like RDA. But it's just way harder to hold on to that lead. And RDA had already had time to settle into welterweight, and is absolutely tireless. And also, like, unlike Barboza, you just can't out-grapple him. Like, maybe you can get RDA down. Who has ever out-grappled RDA in MMA? No one.
I mean, Kamaru Usman.
Wow.
Kamaru Usman and Michael Chiesa are the notable ones, but...
Okay, that's true. That came after Kevin Lee, damn it. Who had ever done it?
Khabib Nurmagomedov.
No. Not really, to be honest. It just kind of took him down a bunch, and then
it's a more competitive fight than it's remembered as being. Yeah,
it's quite competitive. In fact, it's clearly Khabib's win. So here's a takedown from Mike Perry. What happens to Daniel Rodriguez? Let's find out. All right.
I mean, if he immediately gives his back up standing up, then...
No, he doesn't do that. That would be a bad sign. It's a hideous, awful double leg with hardly any level change. And Rodriguez goes for like an arm-in guillotine defense. That's not good. And then
the clock expires.
Perry just like strongman lifts him. Like I just see Kevin Lee being able to get in jabs early before Rodriguez has his timing, which often happens. And then just rushing in and grabbing a hold of him and throwing him around. I think that could be a terribly bad start for Rodriguez, for which I would have a much harder time seeing him recover than someone like RDA, who is just always going to be in the fight, Daniel Rodriguez, at least, is going to have to worry about getting taken down again. Does that put a hitch in his comeback? I don't know. I guess I'm trying to talk around the fact that I agree. It's rough for Kevin Lee. It's not, he hasn't had time to settle into the division. I worry more than anything about his confidence, because he clearly hated the experience of fighting RDA in his first welterweight fight. And you can judge that by the fact that he dropped right back down to lightweight. One attempt at welterweight and he was like, no, it's not for me. And now he's only coming back here, because he missed weight in his last fight, which was over a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about Kevin Lee is that he's clearly someone who's trying to convince himself the whole time. He's now got his insanely silly tattoo on the back of his neck, but you can see it happening to him in the fights. He's like, I'm getting stuck in these exchanges. I don't know how to get out of them.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to force his way through it. You just don't get that impression from Rodriguez.
No.
Rodriguez, you get the impression he is extremely happy being stuck in exchanges with pretty much anyone.
Yeah.
That he's just genuinely enjoying it. And, you see in the fight against Perry, when he has someone where he knows where their head is, he's just lighting them up.
You're right. I mean, we'll talk about Kevin Lee's jab. The major success that Rodriguez had was it stood out even more because it was an open stance fight, was the southpaw jab. He just hit Perry with it about 8,000 times and set up all types of shit off of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's better for Kevin Lee, this fight, because but it's at least 3 rounds. He can potentially try and ride out a quick start. I think there's other routes to success potentially against Rodriguez that Kevin Lee, if he's being, we've said he comes in with good tactical ideas for the guy up ahead that he's fighting. There are things that he can do there. Primarily, he should try and jab with Rodriguez and then low kick him, because Rodriguez is incredibly heavy on the front foot but has only fought boxers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find it just really hard to pick Kevin Lee. I think it'll either be like a shocking early finish if Kevin Lee beats him, or it will have to be like a, oh my god, Kevin Lee has finally found himself kind of win.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rodriguez, and probably by finish, I would say, in I'm going to say second round.
Round 2. Rodriguez is jabbing Mike Perry to pieces. Mike Perry rushes in for somehow an even uglier takedown entry than the previous one. He just sort of reaches out, comes in to give Grandma a hug, and body locks Rodriguez. No. Phil, did you hear me? Mike Perry body locks.
You're talking about him managing to wrestle. Okay, I'm with you.
He body locks Rodriguez, takes him down instantly, up against the fence. Rodriguez wants to quickly get back up. What does he do? He gives his back. I like Rodriguez so much. I don't think he's well enough tested against a variety of fighters. I mean, you pointed out that he's fought mostly boxers. He's fought like that is true in excluding every other phase of MMA as well. He hasn't fought many capable wrestlers, many capable kickers. He's just fought people who want to step in the pocket and do combos.
Apart from Dalby, who won a dogshit decision.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not super confident, and I'm not as confident as you that Kevin Lee has no shot here. I just think it's too easy to overlook how terrifying it can be to grapple with Kevin Lee when, maybe you're used to just shutting down obvious shots, and also you have this basic universal understanding of the best way to deal with grapplers is to immediately get back up and give my back, which is exactly what Kevin Lee's ground game is designed to capitalize on.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm going to pick Rodriguez too. I don't trust Kevin Lee. I think he's lacking in confidence, and Rodriguez is not anything like that. So if Kevin Lee doesn't finish him early, he's still going to be there. He's still going to be touching Kevin Lee up. That, as you said, is the kind of stuff Kevin Lee hates. When he's already felt himself lose a major turning point, and then the loss just keeps slowly piling up. He hates that. It doesn't inspire him to do anything else. He runs out of ideas because he's constantly overthinking.
Yeah, if I was confident that the move to welterweight had given Kevin Lee endless cardio, I might be more likely to pick him.
Yeah.
But, that first RDA fight, we mentioned before, don't want to bang on about it, when people move up, their first fights are mostly shit. When people change divisions, it is an acceptable excuse for why that kind of thing happens. But it's been such a long gap that I just feel like this is his first fight back up at welterweight again.
Yeah.
If I thought that he could wrestle consistently, I might be happier to pick him. But as it is, he's just going to get stuck if he gets stuck on the feet for a long time with Rodriguez, I think Rodriguez is just going to tear him to pieces.
Maybe he spent the whole year and a half acclimating himself to being bigger.
I hope so.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Would have been a good idea. We'll see. It is an interesting fight. It's sort of a throwback styles clash thing that, where one style may just end up stomping the other. Looking forward to that. Obviously, and arguably thankfully, we don't have time to discuss Muradov Meerschaert.
We can.
Yeah.
Very briefly, I think Muradov is, he's quick and he strikes from the outside and then gets back out again really quickly, and Meerschaert is super slow, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, but Meerschaert's got that weird thing going on,
Oh yeah, he rules.
Slow man boxing prowess.
Yeah, he's one of these guys where he's super tall, and if you get stuck inside of the range of his all his stuff that he does, he's genuinely pretty dangerous there, like Ben Rothwell or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think Muradov is again he's stylistically really bad for him because he's just going to keep moving, darting in and out, and Meerschaert won't know what he's hitting.
Yeah, just too quick. All right, well, after this, going to look back. Cannonier Gastelum. The other stuff from that card. After this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. We're falling into our old ways of just naysaying and shitting on everything, Phil. Can't help it with these cards. Who fucking cares about any of these? Oh, hello?
We're falling into our old habit of the connection dying the whole time.
Yes. Well, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Jared Cannonier, Kelvin Gastelum. Did you like it, Phil?
Yeah, it was fine. It was
okay.
It was a ceiling fight.
Uh-huh.
It was like what was it called? It was like Felder Hooker. It's like, this is as good as these guys can be, I think. Cannonier is very slightly better than Kelvin Gastelum, and Kelvin Gastelum is very slightly worse than Jared Cannonier, and neither of them is going to be able to ever be anyone significantly above this level.
Yeah, I think I would be more skeptical of that diagnosis if only Cannonier weren't so old. The rules might change. I saw a lot of interesting stuff from Cannonier in this fight.
You know, he's a more, I think it's tempting to think that he's just got like a brute's brain, because his style seems so brutish, and he's clearly a very, insane man, you know, in his out of the cage life. But he is a thinking fighter. And that was very clear. He was very calculating throughout this fight, sometimes to a borderline Mike Winklejohn sort of extent, which I think John Crouch's fighters sometimes have a bit of that. You know, Ben Henderson famously is kind of a slot different moves in. You know, I've got a new crazy move for this fight. That's kind of the way he thinks. And there was a bit of that. Like, you could see Cannonier cycling through random ideas and at times getting a little fixated on like a given thing that seemed like it might be cool to try. Like, there's about a 30-second span in maybe round 3 or something where he's like, I'm going to do up elbow counters.
Yep.
You remember that? And he just
One of them worked.
One of them worked. And then he kept trying it.
Made the whole thing worth it.
Yeah. But you know, he didn't get stuck on that, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, because he also drifted away from certain things that were working for him in this fight, down the stretch, but came up with some interesting adjustments. The one that really, really stood out to me, was this showed his stubbornness, but also his thoughtfulness as a fighter. Cannonier going southpaw. Which on its face, I kind of hated, because I'm like, he's only doing this because he can't figure out how to land his jab and set up his right hand against a southpaw, which to me is a bad sign. Like, who were you fighting in sparring in training camp? Do you have this like really stupid rudimentary understanding of what it is to fight a lefty that I'm always complaining about, where like, oh, I step my foot outside and then I throw the right hand and I forget everything else. But it was, whatever the cause, it was clearly frustrating him. After a point, he couldn't quite get in past Gastelum's lead foot and lead hand. And so he switched southpaw so he could, and it instantly worked. You know, he instantly was landing super hard right jabs, these long lancing jabs, from the southpaw stance, and, landing those short right hooks as well. And then it almost as instantly started getting him fucked up. He was so incredibly awkward. Like, it was clear he doesn't do this often in training. He has no defense in southpaw. I was like, but why does he keep going for this? He's so insistent. It's just he needs to land that right hand, so he's taking this huge risk. But over the course of the fight, he kind of figured it out. Like, he stopped getting absolutely blasted with straight lefts every time he went southpaw. He started to manage the distance a little better. He sensed those entries coming in, because Kelvin Gastelum is a fighter who only does one thing, very unlike Jared Cannonier. He was able to anticipate that one thing and then fit the other southpaw ideas he had around it, which I was pretty impressed by, actually. He made a nice adjustment there. But while being super stubborn and insisting on, you know, this like really roundabout way of finding his right hand in the fight.
Yeah, that sounds about like the story. I mean, so I sort of alluded to this earlier on when we were talking about Chikadze, is that he's got his offense stance and his defense stance, and that was really the sort of Cannonier story for this fight, is that he was, as you mentioned, like doing well in the open stance matchup in the beginning, partially because he was able to throw the right head kick and just keep the Gastelum left hand at home.
I liked that.
And then he was just like, you know what, I'm not really feeling the whole kicking thing. He said he was worried about it getting caught, but I don't think that was true, because it didn't happen very much.
And also, like, a large part of what he was throwing were high kicks.
Yeah.
Which are famously quite difficult to catch. You can do it, but it's risky and not easy.
Yeah. I think it was more that he's pretty slow, and he felt like he couldn't keep up with Gastelum's foot speed if he was going to be planting to throw his kicks.
That was what I thought as well.
That he just didn't want to have to like get blitzed on one leg, I think was the main thing. But But other than that, yeah, I think you broke it down really well. He came out with some good ideas. He showed, who the thinking fighter in the matchup is. Did you think, like, Gastelum? What do you think about Gastelum? Do you think he looked pretty much the same?
The same.
Yeah, it's hard to really say much. He got into trouble and then he upped the pace, and then he would just sort of shrink back out again. I don't think like Cannonier ever really found many super consistent answers to Gastelum just coming in with the 1-2.
Yeah,
he did actually occasionally. Like he would find, this is the thing. Yeah, he found these kind of Winklejohn-esque counters. Mm-hmm. Every time he'd find something which would slow Gastelum's roll, whether it was the elbow counter. He landed one really nice uppercut.
Yep.
So
he landed that right hook as a counter one time. Yeah, it was like I said, it was a little frustrating at first because the adjustments he were making were happening on this really rudimentary level. He wasn't playing any sort of games with Gastelum. He wasn't manipulating Gastelum's expectations or anything. But at the first level of like, okay, how do I stop this guy getting close enough to do that to me again? Or he's trying to get close to me. How do I make him pay for that? He did come up with answers, and he came up with them in a way that it ultimately kind of tickled me. Like you said, the Winklejohn-esque thing, of just being like, okay, what if I do this insane move as he's flying in to hit me?
Yep.
It didn't really go beyond that, but I did enjoy seeing that. And I think genuinely in a lot of ways, this was the best Cannonier we've ever seen, which is why I say I would be less down on his potential if he weren't so old, because he has grown pretty tremendously quickly at middleweight. He's I think having the strength and confidence was the bedrock, but as a technical fighter, he's getting much deeper and clearly adding new ideas and experimenting with things and finding out what kind of striker he wants to be. I think there is a lot of potential for flexibility, for stylistic flexibility in the way Cannonier approaches a fight. He already has an established tendency of sort of building and adapting over the course of a fight. Like for example, right in his first middleweight fight against David Branch, gets taken down twice in the first round, and then starts stuffing the takedowns pretty easily, and ultimately ends up knocking Branch out off of a stuffed takedown. That's been an established pattern in this division. He can fight going forwards or going backwards, which he did both in this fight at varying points. I like Cannonier as a developing fighter. I just don't know how much more time he has left to continue developing along these sort of uncertain lines. But he clearly was the more thoughtful and better fighter than Gastelum. I thought Gastelum looked the same. He never changes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like about that. Well, not a lot to like about it, but it was good. I think it was, as you mentioned, it was the best Jared Cannonier we've seen. But I think like that's kind of thing. I think Gastelum pulls that out of him. I think he is just good enough and bad enough that can happen.
Yep.
He's not someone who's just going to like cleanly beat him like Whittaker, and nor is he someone who's just going to get put away by the first clean punch.
Yeah.
Or who's going to give up. I think he was just really well suited to bring a smart performance out of Cannonier. And yeah, I don't really know where Cannonier goes after this. Does he fight Paulo Costa? It seems like who he has to fight.
Sure, why not? No idea where Paulo Costa's at right now.
Yeah, looking like a light heavyweight. Is the last thing I remember. Looking like he can no longer make 185. Losing
his hair and getting even more jacked, which is clearly his way of compensating with what happened in the Adesanya fight. I had to become even more hyper-masculine to console myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would like to see that. I would like to see Jared Cannonier against the new improved Derek Brunson. I think that's a very tough test for Derek. Mm-hmm. But
potentially also a very tough test for Cannonier. Cannonier is gets by a lot in his strength. Derek Brunson is not only insanely strong, but also a really good technical wrestler. I'd be very curious to see that.
Yep. But he's fighting Tell, so...
Yeah.
Seems like Costa is... He pretty much has to fight Costa, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Unless it's Vittori somehow.
That could be okay, too.
Yeah, it's just a slightly better version of the Gastelum fight, I think, with like it might be genuinely close rather than the sort of I don't know how they're going to score this one closeness of this fight, which I thought was a fairly clear 48-47 Cannonier and I would say closer to being 49-46 than it was like any defensible Kelvin scorecard.
Yep, I agree with that. Okay, what else we got here? Before we sprinkle in any of these other fights, a couple of which were interesting. This is the case with these kinds of cards, like you just can't muster any intrigue whatsoever going in. But after the fact, you've seen it. So then you can talk about the stuff that was good. But we should, immediately talk about the flyweights because that was the only other really interesting fight going in. Pantoja Royval ended up being pretty in line, I think, with what we expected. Maybe a little. I was actually a little surprised at how consistently Royval was able to keep the scrambles going, and it seemed a little closer to the line than I would have liked for Pantoja.
Yeah. Royval, I mean, it's hard to say, but he looks like he might have some of the best cardio I've ever seen.
I mean,
this seems weird saying in a fight, where he got choked out, but it was the fact that after that first round where he just relentlessly tried to scramble from the bottom through absolutely everything he could at Pantoja, and then got up and looked utterly fresh.
Yeah.
Baffling.
Pantoja was, I thought, in a pretty dangerous position in terms of stamina around the time he got the finish. But ultimately, Royval was able to just keep those scrambles going. I think honestly, Royval almost successfully used Pantoja's love of back takes against him.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly, we called it out as like, it's happened to Royval now in more than one fight. Somebody's controlled him for a long period of time from the back. It looked like, I don't know if Royval came in planning for that specifically, or if it's just the way that Pantoja very clearly wants to jump on your back the moment he grabs a hold of you. But, if Pantoja had just accepted the half guard that Royval basically kept giving him when he was doing all those Granby rolls, which is I think how Brandon Moreno got to his back. He got him. Royval tried to spin. Moreno settled into half guard and cooked him a bit, and then he got the back take out of that. I think Pantoja could have done the same, but he really, really wanted to jump on the back as quickly as possible, and he wanted to maintain it. And he did a remarkable job of staying a step ahead of Royval in those crazy Granby rolling scrambles. But it clearly cost a lot of energy to match that pace.
Yeah. Royval he's a genuinely fascinating fighter for me now because, as mentioned...
Now?
I mean, even more so because he managed to almost exhaust Alexandre Pantoja by not winning the fight at all at any point.
Very Tony Ferguson approach, yes.
Yeah, but even more so. Even Tony Ferguson never maybe looking back at the stuff like the Barboza fight. Mm-hmm. But it was the fact that he was getting mostly owned on the floor, and he got up and they had these wild striking exchanges where Royval was just trying to drown him, and Pantoja was just cracking him with the hardest punches that he could.
Every right hand he threw was landing on the chin.
Yeah, under a absolute stream of offense.
Yeah.
This was an insane fight, and can you believe that not only did this not win Fight of the Night, but they didn't give out any Fight of the Night bonuses?
What?
Yeah.
What? What justification for that?
They gave Performance of the Night to Pantoja. but they told, presumably, like, Royval just should have tried harder to win.
He was insane. You should reward Royval every time he fights. He's exactly the type of fighter your bonus system is designed for.
Mm-hmm.
He's nothing but highlights. That is really silly.
Maybe they wanted the fight to go on for longer. They want people to, like, you should love this stuff. People love watching quick, violent UFC fights, and then you get to cram in more of your terrible programming and ad breaks.
Yeah, that is scandalous. It was super fun, and it was something unique. That Brian, you're right. Royval was like, he was losing the entire time, but he almost won, like, strategically by just losing a series of small battles.
Your whole time you're just watching and thinking, is he going to turn this around?
Yeah. Can Pantoja keep winning like this?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like they were Pyrrhic victories for Pantoja, and like 100 of them in a row.
Yeah.
It was almost a pace victory for Royval. So that was fascinating. And then ultimately Pantoja's like, what if I take us back by just sitting down against the cage? I'm tired. And that worked. That was pretty funny. He's like, I'm not even going to go seatbelt. Double underhooks, sit down. Please come in between my legs. I need to choke you out. All right. Anything else on the card just to touch on? I did find Madsen Guida weirdly interesting. It had this strange dynamic where, like, Guida was clearly winning by being the more experienced MMA fighter. Like he was catching Madsen in all these transitions at points, but whenever Madsen just slotted himself into either wrestling or just boxing, he was like better technically at both.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being a really good, well-matched win for him because, it put him through lots of tough, very unique MMA situations. And in the end, what got him through it was just that he sat down and was just like, I'm just going to jab Clay Guida the whole time. He's not built to deal with this at all. He doesn't come from an era of MMA where people jabbed much.
Right.
And it just totally worked. He just feinted the jab or he threw the jab.
Yep.
Also, Guida's hair is incredibly distracting.
You found it distracting or Madsen did?
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's the way that, like, he's got the, there's just like a top knot of hair at the front of his head, which is being slowly sliced away by a pincer movement of baldness. I find it quite hard to watch.
His forehead is performing the classic Zulu battlefield maneuver, the horns of the buffalo.
Yep.
Soon the cavalry will smash into the back, and Guido will have a bald spot on the crown of his head. Yeah, okay. I don't know if there's anything else really. Parker Porter, pretty good heavyweight. I liked that.
Yeah, he's one of these guys where people are gonna be like, oh, is this guy,
Yeah.
He's an undersized, cool boxing person, and then he's gonna fight whoever the equivalent of Chet Congo is, which I'm assuming is Andrei Arlovski, and he's gonna get ground out, and we'll be like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Chet Congo, that fight ruled way more than anyone could have expected.
Did it?
I
didn't watch it.
Okay, so it was super violent. Like Karatonov really went after him. Looked like he was finishing him. And then Chet Congo decided to activate his occasional Chet Congo the heroic comeback fighter card.
No.
And managed to take Karatonov down and beat him up and get a submission with a minute to go in the first round. I mean, sorry, a second to go in the first round.
Shit. Why did I watch the UFC card?
I mean, to be fair, it was a Chet Congo fight. I do love the fact that Chet Congo has now been around for long enough that you could make a legit Chet Congo highlight reel where you could make him look like an insanely cool, fun fighter.
Yeah. He finally has it just took him a long, long time to compile a highlight reel that matches his physique.
Yeah, you could just show him knocking down Cain Velasquez, coming back against Karatonov and Barry, like elbowing Paul Buentello in the thigh to a TKO.
Okay, we're actually running out pretty quickly. We've got about 3 or 4 that we can think of. Yeah. Okay. That's it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. We'll be back next week to discuss, like I said, it's arguably a little better. It's a good bit better, I think, actually, than this card for the moment.
Yes.
Let's
make sure to say that right off the bat.
Always subject to change.
Touch wood.
Touch wood. God, I hate that. Knock on wood is the expression. Touch wood makes me think of one of your other expressions that we don't have, which is touching cloth.
Oh yeah, I think you've mentioned this before.
Yeah.
But surely you must touch wood better because it means you can giggle at how gay it sounds.
We're going to have a discussion after we close the show out here about hotting up and all the other British expressions that I absolutely loathe. But for now, let's wrap up the show. Oh my God. Volkanovski versus Ortega is still so far away, Phil. I was just looking through the upcoming schedule. It's a month away.
We've got an Anthony Smith main event coming up soon.
Smith versus Spawn. Nothing has filled me with more dread than that. I hate that so much. Jesus Christ. This summer schedule is killing me. All right, folks. We did our best. We're going to get back to being fun and optimistic about the cards when the cards get just slightly better. For the time being, this was Heavy Hands. Find Phil on social media, on Twitter. I don't know why I always say social media. We're both just on Twitter. Find Phil on Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson. Find me on Twitter at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. Find our writing on Bloody Elbow. You may have seen me talking about a piece that is almost done about MMA fighters turning their backs all the damn time. It's essentially about footwork and pivoting and why pivoting is better than running away. That should be coming out this week on Bloody Elbow. And, yeah, we'll talk to you next week for another scintillating card. I don't want to get you too hyped, but it's Darren Till versus Derek Brunson. Phil's cut out again. It's all falling apart. Goodbye. This is it. This is the final episode of Heavy Hands. Bye. Oh.
Connor, I know something that will make you feel better about that Smith versus Spawn card, or Spawn. Spawn. Smith versus Spawn. It also has Iwan Kutalaba against Evan Clark.
Oh my God. Do they only have light heavyweights left? Why are there so many like light heavyweight and middleweight main events? What's happening?